Hello and welcome to Mr. Naughton's guided lecture. We are still on Unit 3, Nutrition. Today we are going to talk about and discuss fast foods and portion sizes, something that this country has big problems with. As we stated the lesson before with our article of the day, we kind of showed you and opened your eyes to the actual amount of portion size have changed over the years, doubling and tripling over the last 20 years, which is very alarming, especially because of the obesity rates and the overweight rates that we see in the United States currently. So, fast foods, they're everywhere. Why do we buy them? Well, the reason is because they have the same taste everywhere. So when you go to McDonald's in Illinois, you know that if you're in California, you can go to this a McDonald's in there, and you're gonna get the same type of food, and it's gonna taste the same. So people find comfort in that, knowing that wherever they go, that's gonna be the same food. You could even go to China or Germany and get the same food that you would get right at home. Fast foods are relatively cheap. We know that with the craze of the dollar menu and the value menu and all these other things, is that you can get a lot of food for not a lot of money. And a lot of people that don't have a lot of money actually tend to buy more fast food because of its cheapness. And of course, just like all people in the United States, the reason why people probably love fast food the most is because it's fast. It's easy, it's convenient. They can drive, they can stay in their car and pick up the food, and it's there for them within minutes most of the time. But the one thing you have to know is that several of these fast foods lack a bunch of nutrients. Fast foods are low in vitamins, especially vitamins A and C. They're low in minerals like iron and calcium. So, even though they're fast, they're cheap, and they taste the same everywhere, they still have low nutrients and lack the essential nutrients that you need every single day. What do fast foods high in? They're high in calories, they're high in fat, they're high in sugar, they're high in salt, and they're high in additives. And we're going to talk about sugar, salt, and additives in the next few slides. Fats. Not more than, you should already know this, 30% of our calories should come from fats. We talked about fats in our last lesson. You should know that 10% of your fat should come from saturated, usually solid at room temperature. Stick of butter is the easiest way to remember that. And you should know you should get 20% of your fats from unsaturated fats, usually liquid at room temperature. We used olive oil as our example for that. Sugars. Any word ending in "ose" is sugar. Brown sugar, syrup, molasses, corn syrup, there's a whole mess of them, and you're going to see the big list of sugars on the next slide. As in the United States, the average person who lives in the United States eats 130 pounds of sugar every single year. That's a lot. That's how much most of you or some of you weigh. So a whole human in pounds of sugar. Think about that. Here is the list. We have 57 different names for sugars. 57. That's a lot of sugars. A lot of them, as you can see, end in "ose." Some of them end in "ose." Some of them trick you and think that they have fruit in them, or that they're good for you because it's beet sugar or it's corn syrup. So people might think that it's actually good for you because it has some type of vegetable in it. But truth be told, all of these are sugars, and none of them are what you're looking for other than number 23, fructose. Okay, fructose is the sugar that you should be getting because because insulin is not produced when fructose is consumed. All these other sugars, when they're consumed, insulin has to be produced and has to wipe out the sugar if it gets too high. So watch out for these 56 other sugars. Salt, also sodium or NaCl is its scientific name. What does salt do? Well, salt aggravates high blood pressure. And as Americans or in the United States, we usually eat around 11 pounds yearly. There's several different websites that have different dietary recommendations for salt. They say you should get roughly around 1,500 to 2,300 milligrams per day, which is just about 3/4 of a tablespoon. Okay, the average person takes in 3,400 milligrams per day. Okay, so that's over double the minimum amount recommended. So that's a lot of salt per day, a lot of extra salt. Additives. Why are they used? Well, they're used for one of three things. They're either there to add flavor, they're there to enhance appearance, or they're there to prolong shelf life so they could stay on the shelves longer. Some have been found to cause cancer. So we need to be aware of that, and we need to understand and identify that. I have shared with you actually an additives article that I suggest you take a look at and you can read about, and it tells a bunch of different additives and the problems that they bring along when dealing with food and consuming them. So, what happens when you supersize? Well, we'll pick on McDonald's as we usually do because it's the most popular fast food chain out there and it's been for a very, very long time. So, a small McDonald's meal, a hamburger, fries, and a Coke, totals about 640 calories, about 20 grams of fat. The hamburger has about 260 calories, the fries 230, and the small Coke about 150 calories. You're looking at about 20 grams of fat. Not too bad. Not too bad. Then we look at the Big Mac. The Big Mac has 560 calories, 30 grams of fat. Large fries, 520 calories, 25 grams of fat. A large Coke, 310 calories, 1,390 calories, 55 grams of fat. That's a lot of calories. That's a lot of fat. I don't think there has to be enough said about this. Especially when you look at the daily recommended calories for teenage females and teenage males. The number one dietary problem in the US today, the number one is obesity, and that's being extremely overweight or also having a BMI of 30 or higher. The daily recommended calories for a teenage female is around 2,200 calories, and for males is about 3,000. As you can see on the previous slide, if you had one large McDonald's meal, for females you're over halfway done with your caloric intake just for one sitting, one meal. That's not going to include, if that was for dinner, that wouldn't include breakfast or lunch or any snacks in between. And for males, that's just about halfway to your point. So if you had a similar meal with similar amount of calories, you'd be way over, which means you'd be gaining weight. And a person who is heavier than the standard for the person's height is considered to be overweight. And there's some charts that I'm going to share with you. There's BMI charts, there's height and weight charts that you should know and just should have a standard for understanding. This was an interesting study. This was a study that likened obesity to television viewing with hours per day. This was based on a national sample of boys and girls aged 10 to 15 years old. So, they asked boys and girls aged 10 to 15 years old how many hours of TV they watched per day. And then they checked out their BMI, they checked out their height and weight to see if they were considered obese. So, children or teenagers who watched 0 to 2 hours of television had just about a little bit more than a 10% chance of becoming obese. And as you can see, as it gets higher and higher and higher, this is viewing hours per day, the likelihood of obesity goes higher. What does that mean? Well, there's a big correlation between being lazy, being in front of the television, and being overweight. Not enough opportunities, not enough time taken to be exercising. Boys and girls aged 10 to 15 years old should be getting at least 30 to 60 minutes a day of exercise. Look at these slides. This slide is from the CDC in 1990. This is the amount of people in the United States that were considered obese. The white suggests no data. The light blue is less than 10%. And then the little bit darker blue is 10 to 14%. And the darkest blue is 15 to 19%. As you can see in all 50 states, there is not one state that has this darkest blue, that has people that are considered overweight in any state, 15 to 19% of the population. Let's fast forward 10 years later. The year 2000. As you can see from before 1990, almost all light blue and medium blue. Now there's only one state, Colorado, that is in that medium blue category. Everything else is in dark blue or is in this yellow color, which is 15 to 19% to 20 to 24%. That means in just 10 years, we made a jump of almost 20%, 15% people being overweight and obese in this country. Now, let's fast forward 10 more years. Look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 states. Obesity rate, overweight rate, over 30%. Not one state is under 20%. What's it going to be like in 2020? What's it going to be like? What is it like now? I guarantee you it's been going up. They come out with these studies every 10 years. I'm afraid to see what's next in 2020. So, when we're talking about eating right and portioning your food, this is what it should look like. We should have a plate that looks like this with this type of food on there. The baseball in the top left corner represents the size that you should have for your fruit or your vegetable. The computer mouse represents another vegetable. So you should get at least a size of this for a fruit and a size of that for a vegetable every single meal. The CD is a pancake, about the size of what a pancake should be, so you can get your whole grains. The audio cassette player, which if you don't know what it is, it's the one right below the CD, is what the piece of bread, how big of a piece of bread we should have. This is also showing that we should be getting 1/4 of our plate should be whole grains. And then 1/4 of our plate, or like the size of a deck of cards, should be meat. And they suggest using lean meat and lean protein. So they're suggesting half of your plate should be covered with fruits and vegetables, 1/4 of your plate with whole grains, and then 1/4 of your plate with meat. How many of you are actually following this portion plate every single day? I guarantee you it is the minority. The minority of the people in this class, in this country, are following these things. That's what we have to know. This is how we stay healthy. And right here in this middle is the fats, oils, and sweets. I know it doesn't look like a very big treat, but it should be a small treat for you, especially if you're eating this well every single day. So, what happens when people eat too much during holidays and celebrations, or people eat too much when they're dining with guests? Well, there's psychological cues for eating more, actually. The reason being is because when you're at that party, or when you're at that celebration, or when you're out to dinner with guests, there are several different foods on your plate, and there's actually several different foods to have. There's many different foods, and a lot of times people feel guilty for not eating certain foods, especially if they're made by different people. There are special foods, special sauces, special desserts. Everyone wants to try something. Everyone's suggesting if they made it or they brought it that you try it, and you feel like you would offend them if you didn't. And then, with having guests over, or with being over at guests, or with celebrating a holiday, you're going to be sitting at the table longer with your family members, or with your friends, or with whoever you're out with. So, here's some things that you need to be aware of. Fad diets. These are popular diets that may help a person lose or gain weight, but without proper regard for nutrition and other health issues. Therefore, we see these fad diets pop up a lot here and there, and they'll usually be popular for a little bit, and then they'll fade away. Diet aids, like pills or candies or some type of suppressant that are supposed to help you suppress your appetite or not make you feel hungry. These are usually ineffective. They can also be habit forming, and they can cause unwanted side effects, so you have to be aware of those. Fasting or starving yourself, refraining from eating as a way to lose weight. We know this is not smart. This can also lead to stunted growth, strained kidneys, hair loss, and other side effects. And we know how the body puts ourselves in starvation mode, so the next time we eat, the food will be stored away as fat instead of being used as energy. So fasting is not an option. Here are some good tips that you should remember for sensible weight control. You should be recognizing your eating patterns if you want to control your weight. That can include keeping a diary, talking about the time, how much you ate, What do you feel like when you eat? Any triggers that might set you off if you are overeating? This could help people if they're having trouble dieting or they're having trouble with their weight to be able to remind themselves of how to eat properly. You should also plan ahead. Be proactive. Get these helpful strategies. Eat those small portions that we showed you on the portion size plate. Eat slowly. You can take frequent breaks in between. Do not eat while watching TV, driving, or reading. Try to exercise when bored instead of eating. If you're hungry, instead of just snacking, maybe you should go for a walk and then have a fruit or a vegetable and see how you feel after that. And don't get discouraged. Overeating occurs sometimes, so don't get upset. Controlling weight is a long-term process, and if you are maintaining your weight well and you're doing a good job, you have an opportunity to treat yourself every once in a while with some type of dessert or with some type of treat that that you usually don't eat. But remember, it should all be in moderation. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. We will see you next time. This is Mr. Naughton signing out. Bye bye.